Howard, and today I am at the Kimbell Art Museum to interview Senior Curator Jennifer Casler Price. Today we'll be discussing the special exhibition, Myth and Marble, Ancient Roman Sculpture from the Torlonia Collection. Jennifer, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here.
So this collection, it's its first time being presented outside of Europe. Tell me about the legacy and the history of the Torlonia family and how they went about to acquire this prestigious collection.
Right. I mean, it's really an extraordinary collection on a lot of different levels. First of all, and probably most significant, is it's the largest and most important private collection of ancient Roman sculpture in the world, rivaling the Capitoline in Rome and also the Vatican City. So it was formed in the 19th century primarily by first Giovanni Torlonia and then his son Alessandro Torlonia. And the way that it was put together is a little unique in that they went about acquiring pre-existing collections of ancient Roman statuary that had been formed, from the Renaissance and the Baroque periods up to the 19th century. So Giovanni began by acquiring two very important collections, one of Bartolomeo Cavaceppi, who was a very famous restorer, and then Vincenzo Giustiniani, who had a renowned collection of over 200 sculptures. So he acquired both of those. Then he acquired the Villa Albani in 1866, which was a renowned, beautiful villa that was filled with antiques and sculptures. And then finally, through carrying out excavations on Torlonia properties in and around Rome, the Torlonia family made their money through banking and real estate. So on their own properties, they carried out excavations, particularly Alessandro, which was pretty, kind of groundbreaking at the time. By 1876, they had amassed a collection of 622 sculptures. To this day, they still have 622 sculptures, and that's also quite unique and unusual because many private collections over the years have been dispersed, either through war or for financial reasons. So the Torlonia family has kept this collection together. So that's a really special thing as well. In 1876, Alessandro opened a museum, the Museo Torlonia, and put on view all 622 sculptures. That also was kind of unprecedented at the time. In 1876, the idea of a private museum was new. The collection became known both through the Museo and also through an illustrated catalog that was published in 1884, which also was quite groundbreaking at the time. They were using a new technology, lithographic phototype. And they illustrated all 622 sculptures in the collection. And so that catalog, the Visconti catalog, has remained a document, a visual document of this collection, so that when the museum closed in the wake of World War II, obviously to protect the sculptures, so they all went into storage and remained unseen for over 70 years until 2020. The collection was still known to scholars and specialists in the field through this illustrated catalog. This selection of 58 sculptures was made by two curators at the Art Institute of Chicago, Lisa Chakmak and Catherine Raff, who worked with Torlonia, with the Fondazione Torlonia. They were really thinking about a North American audience and what they wanted to convey. What story are they trying to tell?
You mentioned a little bit the curatorial process and how the two curators at the Art Institute worked with the Torlonia Collection. Can you tell me about some ways to navigate the exhibition, or maybe certain themes, or a little bit more about the curatorial process?
Sure. I think they were really smart about their approach, and it is very approachable. The thematic sections that they came up with, sort of kind of overarching themes that you would want to present within the context of ancient Roman sculpture, but also kind of highlighting strengths of the Torlonia collection. So starting out first with 3 icons of the collection, and these are 3 works that, again, are known to every scholar in the field of ancient Roman art. And we start the exhibition with those, the Maiden of Volci, the Old Man of Atricoli, and the Old Man of Euthydemus. And these are kind of unique within the collection because they're late 1st century BC, late Republican period, so just before the beginning of the Roman Empire, which happens in 31 BC. Most of the works in the presentation here in the selection date to the 1st to 2nd century AD, which is the height of the Roman Empire. So we start with the 3 icons, and then move into a section of it's ideal bodies and model behaviors. Basically, it's gods and goddesses. So looking at the shared Greco-Roman mythology that we find in a lot of statuary, and also kind of highlighting the fact that Rome was always looking back at Greece for inspiration, particularly for artistic inspiration, also taking the pantheon of deities, of Greek deities, and then kind of translating them into Roman vernacular. So that's played out in this wonderful display of gods and goddesses, male and female deities, children, and then even foreign deities that were embraced by the Roman people. Then we move into one of the strengths of the Torlonia collection, which is imperial portraits. The collection is very fortunate to have pretty much kind of a complete set of 2nd century AD imperial portraits of emperors and their wives, sisters, daughters, nieces. And the Torlonias were, both in already acquiring collections, but also kind of filling in the gaps. You kind of wanted to have a full set of each, emperor's family. And so we have 4 groupings of emperors from the 2nd century and their wives. And then we move into a section that addresses the idea of restoration, which is another very interesting thing about the collection and an interesting story that's being told through this particular display. Beginning, collectors from the Renaissance and the Baroque period and even up through the 19th century, when they were acquiring or finding ancient fragments, and we have to remember that when we're looking at marble or even bronze, normally what you're discovering is fragments, underneath, in the soil in Rome, there's a lot of sculpture, but it's all fragmentary. Now, these collectors are wanting complete sculptures to decorate their palazzos and their villas and their gardens, and so it was the norm to have these fragments restored to completion. Today, we're accustomed to seeing fragments and to appreciating fragments as for their authenticity, but that wasn't the case in the early modern period. So pretty much every single sculpture that you'll see in the exhibition has been restored at some point during its lifetime. What we've included with the labels are these wonderful diagrams that actually the Art Institute produced, and the diagrams are color-coded. And so what they show you is what is the original ancient part of the sculpture, what is an ancient piece of marble, but not original to the sculpture, but then was carved or recarved to replace something that was missing, a head or an arm or a leg. And then what is a modern restoration? So again, when we say modern, dating from any time from the Renaissance period to the 19th century. And I think it's really fascinating to look at the diagrams and then look at the sculptures, just to discern, what's ancient and what's modern. Then there's another section that deals with excavations, so specifically the pieces that were excavated from Torlonia properties. And then we end the exhibition with a section on funerary sculptures, funerary monuments. And this is another strength of the Torlonia collection. And in this section are 3 monumental carved sarcophagi, coffins, each weighing between 6,000 and 8,000 pounds apiece. Just extraordinary objects, not pieces. These are not things that, when you went on the grand tour, you were not bringing these home in your suitcase. So again, to think about how the fact that these things are traveling across the Atlantic, from Italy, first to Chicago, then to Fort Worth, and on to Montreal is quite astounding.
So you mentioned her already, one of the quintessential portraits in the exhibition. We're greeted with her right when we walk in, the Madame of Volchi. Tell me about her.
Yeah, so the Maiden of Volchi, again, this is one of the pieces that dates to the late Republic period, and it's really probably one of the most exquisite portraits of that period, depicting this young girl. Presumably she had passed before getting married, that's why she's called Maiden, and probably her parents made this effigy in her honor. It's so sensitively and skillfully carved. It's quite naturalistic, but kind of idealized at the same time. So you have this really beautifully proportioned face. And I think that the sculptor's actually using, kind of like some kind of math or geometry to sort of figure that out. But this very beautiful, sweet face, and then incredible details that also add to the naturalism. This beautifully kind of coiffed hair that has little braids that are going around the sides and the back. This diaphanous blouse that's covering her shoulders. Again, very sensitively carved. And then little details of her eyes, and her ears are pierced, and there's little holes on the side of her head. And we know that this would have been for the addition of jewelry, so earrings and like a headpiece of some sort. And her eyes would have been inset with crystal or some other precious stone, again, to add to the naturalism of the piece. And that's really a hallmark of the late Republican period. We see it also in the 2, I call them the 2 old men, because they're shown in, older age, with wrinkles and kind of, big jowls and almost kind of scowling faces. And again, a hallmark of what we call the veristic style in late Republican sculpture, where what was appreciated was that, with age comes knowledge, right? And stature and respect and gravitas. And so that's what's being portrayed in those 2 sculptures. And then when you get into the Imperial period of the 1st and 2nd century, what you see both in the images of gods and goddesses and even in the imperial portraits is a more idealistic style, where yes, the bodies are rendered naturalistically, but there's still kind of an idealism in terms of, the perfect body, the perfect face, the perfect coiffure, nothing out of place. So an interesting kind of combination of those two things.
In addition to the Maiden of Volchi and some of the other ones you mentioned, there's a lot of other portraits in the exhibition that you mentioned are here on this back wall. I love how you describe them like a parade of portraits. What are some of your favorite ones?
So I think, one of my favorite groups is the Hadrian group. So it's Hadrian and his adopted successor, Antoninus Pius, Hadrian's wife, Sabina, and Antoninus's wife, Faustina the Elder. And what's interesting here on kind of 2 levels, one is a visual level and one is a propagandic level. In the 2nd century, you had this run of emperors, 5 good emperors, and it was a period of peace, prosperity, expansion of the Roman Empire, great civic building, but you had a challenge with succession because you had a number of emperors that either through child mortality or infertility did not have male progeny. So through strategic adoptions and marriages, that's how the lineages carried on. So with Hadrian and Antoninus Pius, they're not father and son, but they're sending that message, and they're sending it visually, because when you look at them, you can see that they look like they could be father and son because they're both sporting these kind of short cropped curly beards and short cropped kind of curly hair. And so that familial connection is being driven home through the sculpture visually, and that was something that every Roman would recognize. But again, it's this propaganda of saying, oh, but we are related because look, we kind of look similar. With the female portraits, they tend to be more idealized in their facial features, and they're kind of trying to emulate goddesses. But the way that you identify them is through their very elaborate coiffures. And there's been a lot of research that's actually come out of this exhibition on the identification of these imperial women, because back in the day when they were being collected, again, you wanted a set, you wanted the full set of everyone. And so the women were being identified as Sabina, as the wife of Hadrian. And subsequently now, through restoration and cleaning and scientific study and research that the Fondazione Torlonia has been undertaking on every single sculpture in the collection, they've come to realize that that's not the hairstyle that Sabina would be wearing. And we know this from the coins. So her image is also on coins. And they're like, oh, so when you look at the labels, it actually says formerly known as, But I think it's so interesting that in these portraits, it is all about the hair. It's all about the hairstyle. And I think it's one of the kind of fun things to look at when you're looking at the portraits.
I did want to briefly mention the goat behind us here, the resting goat. You mentioned some of the modern additions and restorations, and tell me about the Italian Baroque artist Bernini.
Yes,
and his
well,
Angelus.
this is the superstar of the exhibition, I think. This statue of a reclining goat or a resting goat is an example of what we call an exceptional restoration, and that is because this goat, and the ancient part of the sculpture is the body. And then the head and the hooves are done by Gian Lorenzo Bernini, who was the most famous sculptor of the Baroque period. And this ancient goat body had the good fortune to meet Mr. Bernini. This sculpture comes from the Giustiniani collection, one of those famous collections that was acquired by the Torlonias. Vincenzo Giustiniani had in his employ 2 famous sculptors, Pietro Bernini, who was Gian Lorenzo's father, and there's a crouching Aphrodite in the exhibition that has a head restored by Pietro Bernini. But then his son, Gian Lorenzo, in the Renaissance and particularly in the Baroque periods, sculptors who were looking to, hopefully one day make a name for themselves, to learn their craft, hone their craft, would be hired to do restorations on ancient sculptures. And so Gian Lorenzo is hired to create this amazing, amazing head of this reclining goat. And when you look at the contrast between the body, the carving of the body, and particularly the fur, look at the fur on the body. It's kind of smooth, it's not very deep, it's not very articulated, it's kind of meh. And then look at that head, that magnificent head, the luscious curls of the fur, how they're kind of, twisting and turning in space, that little sort of goatee that he's sporting, very deeply carved. the kind of sparkling eyes, almost smiling mouth. It's, I'm getting ready for him to wink at us. These amazing curved horns in space, all the negative space between the horns and the back of the head, and just, again, how deeply carved the curls of the fur are, and even the hooves, which were also done by Bernini. What he's done is he's taken this average, ordinary goat that we would not be talking about today if he had not met Bernini, and has transformed it into, something exceptional.
Find all of our videos and sign up for our newsletter at artthisweek.com. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter.